Okay, we're live.
All right, it's Thursday, February 23rd, and we have S72 in front of us. We also, just for the record, we have a situation where Ledge Council wasn't able to be here today at the last minute, but we do have James Pepper with us, who's very familiar with this bill. He's going to give us sort of a walkthrough and then also share what he has to share about it. If we have any questions for Ledge Council, we can definitely schedule Ledge Council to come in at a later date. So with that, James, do you want to introduce yourself and take it away?
Yes, thank you for that. For the record, James Pepper, I'm the chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board, and I know it's odd for me to be doing a walkthrough of this bill. This is your first time looking at it, but I did work with Michelle very closely on the language, and while the implications of this bill are important, the language itself is relatively easy to follow. And so essentially what you're looking at in section 1 is a section of the cannabis statutes called prohibited products. So while you legalized cannabis and cannabis products in Act 164, that bill contained a section of products that continue to be prohibited even in the adult recreational stores, adult use stores. And it's things like cannabis flower with greater than 30% THC content, flavored vaping cartridges, any sort of combination of alcohol and THC products. And then importantly, you had a ban on solid concentrates that had a THC concentration above 60%. And what this bill does is it eliminates that cap on solid concentrates, that THC cap on solid concentrates. So if you're looking at page 2 of S72, that's lines 3 through 11. And the reason why there's kind of 2 sections that are being struck here is because last year, there's a ban on solid concentrates above 60%. A number of product manufacturers and other licensees came forward and said, well, as long as we're not selling these concentrates to the general public, can they exist within the supply chain? Can we create them and then use that concentrate to kind of make edibles that are consistent with this kind of other THC caps? So a lot of language had to be developed to allow concentrates within the supply chain, but ensure that they were not sold to the general public. And so that's everything that's being struck here would be the effect of it would be allowing solid concentrates above 60% to be sold to the general public. Is that sufficient for a walkthrough, or are there any questions about that? And I know I'm not your counsel, so if you want to save questions about that, the specific language for Michelle, I totally understand.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, but I appreciate that clarification. And if we do have any questions that pop up for Ledge Council, we'll definitely send it there. So thank you.
Okay.
Actually, Senator Vohovsky does have a question.
Thanks for being here. My question actually is around edibles, and there's been some conversation about the amount of packaging waste with our current restriction on number of edibles. Has there been any conversation within the CCB about either raising, because we're at 5 milligrams per serving and 50 per, or like
yeah, that's right,
milligrams per package?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Yes. Essentially there is a separate cannabis miscellaneous bill that we've requested increasing the per package amount, not the per serving amount, but the per package amount to 100 milligrams per package. Given the controversy that has historically surrounded this issue in particular around the not the packaging, but the high THC solid concentrate cap, we made a recommendation. We requested of Senator Sears and the chair of this 2 sponsors of the miscellaneous cannabis bill that this issue around the THC solid concentrate cap be a standalone bill. So I do fully expect this committee, or perhaps this Senate Economic Development Committee, to be dealing with the packaging issue, but it's just not a part of this bill, given the fact that this bill, this issue tends to kind of suck all the oxygen out of the air about everything else. And so we never get to have a full conversation around anything else when this issue is involved. So there is a separate piece of legislation that deals with that.
Okay, and then as a sort of follow-up to that, has there been any conversation about raising that per serving from 5 to 10?
There has been, it's certainly a demand or a request of the advocates. The Cannabis Board doesn't feel it's our position. It's not central to our mission to kind of make that request, but I think you will hear it from other advocates.
Awesome, thanks, James.
Yep, great, thank you. And I'm just gonna kind of shift gears, put on my Cannabis Control Board hat, and just say it's a real pleasure to be here today. A lot has happened in this market since the last time I was here. I provided a few market updates to various other committees of jurisdiction. Of course, the reason I'm here today is just to discuss this THC potency cap. It's a somewhat narrow issue, but it does, as I mentioned, tend to draw a lot of attention. By way of history, the 2020 cannabis bill, it had over 11 committees took jurisdiction of it between the House and the Senate, and at least 4 more were given authority to kind of provide language, add language. And so the final product really at times was quite large. It was contradictory. It was internally inconsistent. Just by way of example, it called for trying to encourage participation by small farmers, and yet outdoor cultivation was not considered agriculture in that bill. And in many cases, as a result, is not permitted on a family farm. We wanted to encourage consumers to purchase legal products, and yet this default opt-out provision has led to a clustering of retail locations in legal towns and cannabis retail deserts in certain regions around the state. Of course, more relevant to this conversation is the legislature collectively decided that the regulation of cannabis, with all of the required testing and packaging and labeling and consumer education, was better for consumer safety than relying on the illicit market. And yet this THC cap does little more than provide an exclusivity lane to the illicit market to sell these products. These products are among the most dangerous to produce, both to the person that is making them, and if done poorly, to the consumer. They oftentimes require volatile solvents. On the illicit market, this means butane or hexane. On the legal market, this is more likely to be ethanol or propane. Either way, we're talking about highly explosive materials that in the legal market are happening in blast-resistant rooms that are certified by fire safety. On the illicit market, they're happening in garages and kitchens where just a random spark from a pilot light or whatever else could cause an explosion.
Can I ask you a question? And I'm sorry if you had said this and I missed it, but the use of these explosive chemicals, is that what are they used for in this process?
Yeah, and I'm sure Jeffrey could go deeper into this. And we actually submitted an 82-page report about how these chemicals are used, but they're essentially used to draw out the THC, the terpenes, the trichomes from, eliminate all of the biomass from the plant and just leave the portions of the plant that, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, et cetera.
Thank you.
So on the consumer side, these solvents can leave toxic residuals that we require be tested for and purged. If the cannabis flower source that kind of inputs, the biomass inputs, has been contaminated by pesticides, even trace amounts of pesticides, those will be concentrated as well and potentially harmful amounts. And again, these are not the concerns of the illicit market, which is largely profit driven. This sort of testing and refinement only comes through regulation, inspection, and oversight. I know that these issues, Sorry.
I was just wondering if you had any statistics on what types of, because I know there was a pretty big outbreak of the vape-related lung injury, and
Yeah.
I am curious to know sort of what the statistics are on whether those were legally purchased or off the illicit market, and kind of what was driving that.
Yes. So the quote unquote EVALI crisis, the electronic vaping associated lung injury, there was around 68 deaths and around 2,800 hospitalizations. I actually think there probably were more, but the crisis kind of ended when the pandemic hit. And I think a lot of the kind of forensics stopped for EVALI. The CDC did a postmortem report on the causes of EVALI. They found vitamin E acetate in the kind of lungs of a lot of the people that were suffering from EVALI or had passed away from it. And they concluded in a report, which I'm happy to share with the committee, and this is the CDC, this isn't kind of an advocacy organization, that the most likely cause of the EVALI crisis was illicit cannabis market vapes that contained this vitamin E acetate. And so, again, it's just very important to underscore the importance of regulation, testing, and oversight, and the ability to recall products. Of course, that doesn't exist on the illicit market.
No.
So, sorry, is there a follow-up?
No, I just
Okay.
thank you.
Yep. I was going to say just, this issue is not new to a lot of you, Senator Vyhovsky. We spent a lot of time in your committee on this last year. The Senate Judiciary Committee actually last year voted to lift this cap 5-0. It was the first time Senator Nitka had ever voted yes on a cannabis bill in her career. The basic parameters of my arguments for removing this cap have not changed. I presume the basic arguments against removing this cap from the medical society have also not changed. So I just want to just at the outset say, the board is not making this recommendation because we believe that these products are somehow healthy. I've personally read all of the studies that I'm assuming the medical society has submitted. I recognize that these products can have negative health consequences, particularly for adolescent and developing brains. We share the same public health concerns that the medical society has. But, the whole premise behind cannabis legalization is an acknowledgement that prohibiting a product does not eliminate the demand for it. The illicit market thrives on prohibition. It will happily meet the demand for concentrates. It will happily do so using contaminated inputs, dangerous methodologies, and whatever else will increase its bottom line. The cannabis board can do better. We are doing better already in making these products safer, keeping them out of the hands of youth, educating consumers at the point of sale about their negative health consequences. And, when I historically have listened to the medical society's testimony, it feels to me that they actually agree that a regulated product is better than an illicit market product. What I believe that their actual concern is that lifting this cap may have the effect of further reducing the perception of harm of concentrates and potentially lead to increased usage. I think that's a legitimate fear. Oh, sorry. Yep.
I was just going to say, I appreciate what you're saying. We can have the medical society testify to, what their current views are. But one question I have for you, I want to make sure that I fully understand the CCB's position. And basically it's, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but basically it's to avoid the contaminants that come from the black market being in products that are being sold so that cleaner products on a regulated market can be sold to the people who are allowed to use these products. Is that kind of in the ballpark?
That is certainly a major dynamic to our argument. I would say that the follow-up also is just, or an additional piece to it is that we have an opportunity at the point of sale to educate consumers about these products in a way that the illicit market does not, about appropriate dosing, about what to do if you've overconsumed, what to look for, who to call, and safe storage. These are the kind of hallmarks of the regulated market that just do not exist in an unregulated market. So, I think this, whether the medical society brings it up or not, I think this idea of perception of harm, normalization, and increased usage are all legitimate concerns. I don't think that what the interesting thing is we're seeing kind of positive outcomes about cannabis usage across the country. I asked Peggy to post a very recent CDC 10-year trend analysis on youth cannabis usage that was recently released. It's between the dates of 2011 and 2021, the exact time frame wherein nearly all of the legal cannabis jurisdictions open for adult use, and the trends are moving in the right direction. Past 30-day usage among high schoolers has dropped from 23% in 2011 to 16% in 2021. There's no definitive way of saying why this is happening. Some of the common threads of an adult use state in addressing perception of harm and usage, again, is not to prohibit, it's to disrupt the illicit market, to have strict limitations on advertising, and to support honest, evidence-based education and prevention programming and counter-marketing campaigns to empower kids to think critically and understand the consequences of these substances. Of course, these are at the foundation of the market that we all have kind of now collectively created. And I would say even more so than almost any other state. Our advertising laws, I'm happy to talk about them, are among the strictest in the country when it comes to cannabis. The legislature has made strategic investments into substance misuse prevention and education. I am particularly excited about the investments that are being made in after-school programming. One of our first cannabis board meetings, we heard from Vermont After School, and it's just so obvious that the work they are doing is the best way to prevent kids from experimenting with illegal substances. They're giving them an alternative to kind of using substances, and an alternative that helps them feel like they belong to a community, that gives them positive adult role models, helps them make kind of executive function decision-making, and encourages them to give back to their community. So I think, the investments that we've made are helping to counteract any sort of normalization or increased access. So I think we are going to start to see the same kind of trends that we're seeing across the country. I think we're going to start seeing in Vermont as well. If anything, continuing to prohibit a product makes it more alluring to youth. We wrote, pursuant to a legislative request, we've drafted an 82-page report that digs very deep into how concentrates are made, how other states deal with them. It has an overview of the scientific literature about them. It has an estimate of the demand for solid concentrates in Vermont currently. And it has some recommendations about how to improve consumer safety and youth education if this cap were to go away. So I don't feel it's appropriate for me to just walk through that 82-page report, but it is posted to your website today. I think it's a very detailed report that I think would answer in better detail than I can give, some of these questions that might be lingering. And with that, I'll just turn things back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, James. I appreciate your testimony and the informal walkthrough at the beginning too. So thank you for doing that. Any questions from you guys? Good. Okay. All right. Thanks again, James. And yeah, if you want to come up, we'll have you next.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Joseph Hoff-Guerin. I'm here representing the Vermont Medical Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics Vermont chapter. Vermont Academy of Family Physicians and Vermont Psychiatric Association. And on behalf of the 2,600 physicians that I'm representing today, we're urging you to vote no on removing the potency caps. We have commented strongly since the regulated market has been debated that potency limits are an important factor in protecting public health. And right now, what we're seeing out of states that have regulated retail markets and that have no potency limits are that the risks of physical dependence and addiction increase with exposure to high concentration THC. And we're also seeing adverse mental health impacts that higher doses of THC and consistent use of these products leads to paranoia, suicidality, psychosis, and uncontrollable vomiting. We testified on this issue last session, and we applaud the legislature for not removing the potency limits. I will just say that what's happening in other states that have no limits on their THC potency is that they are trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And they are working on passing legislation. Colorado passed a bill last year limiting the daily THC purchase of high potency. And right now, Washington State has a couple of bills. One of their bills I would encourage you to read because the nexus of that bill is all about mental health. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing increased visits to the ER. We're seeing people that have any sort of mental health diagnosis having that exacerbated by the high potency cannabis use. And we know that our state is struggling with psychiatric issues and capacity right now. We know that our ERs are dealing with mental health issues where they have nowhere to send people. And so we're saying, go slow. There's no reason for us to raise this potency limit right now. The market just came online in October, and everybody's meeting their goals or surpassing their goals on sales. So there's no reason that we need to have over 60% potency products in the market right now. And like James said, the message that this sends to youth is that these products are safe. And we do not want that idea to be out there. The study that he cited, I haven't seen that, but last year we sent you what happens in Vermont for high school students, and their rate of marijuana use is the highest in the country already. And
would you mind resending that?
yes, I will resend that.
The reason I wasn't here last year, and it's something I'd like to read, so.
Sure, and then the most recent behavioral risk survey, the most recent youth risk behavioral survey is not out. That won't be out until March for Vermont numbers, but the most recent adult behavioral risk survey numbers just came out, and that shows that young adults who are the highest users of cannabis generally, they are using at 34%, and that's 18 to 24-year-olds.
Have those statistics changed since we legalized adult sales?
No, because those are 2021 numbers, so we wouldn't have that data online yet. So yeah. So the other thing, so that's our major point, is that right now our mental health capacity is just not there. We're not meeting the needs of Vermonters. And so we're seeing from other states and from the data that high potency cannabis use results in adverse mental health impacts. And so we do not think that we need to do this right now.
So one question I have regarding the data. So with people who have mental health issues, who've been hospitalized in Vermont, do you have the numbers on how much of an increase there's been of people who've used concentrates that have above a 60% concentration?
I don't. You're talking about Vermont mental health.
Vermont or other states.
Okay, yeah.
In your examples.
Yeah, I can find information related to that.
And do you also have, I don't know if this was gonna be in what you're sending, but you mentioned that there's states with no potency limits and they've shown an increased dependence, or some people in those states have shown an increased dependence. Do you have that data available too?
Yeah, it's actually in my, where it says report, you can link to that, and that was Washington State. Washington State has seen exponential use of high potency products once their cannabis market came online, and so they don't have any potency limits right now, and so they put together a prevention research subcommittee out of the University of Washington that was focused on this issue specifically. They're a really good resource on what's happening with high potency use. They also, I didn't say this, but they're one of the bills they have is to put the 65% tax on any cannabis with potency over 35%. So that's another way that they're looking at it. The other thing that I just wanted to point out is, or one of the other things, is that there's a lot of confusion about what these products are, and we had to, do some work on figuring out like what are we actually talking about. And I think last year there was definitely a lot of confusion, and people were making this argument about, well, if you have 60%, what is that other 40%, and isn't that very dangerous, and there's diluents and additives and things like that. And what we found is that there are solid concentrates, which is what we were tackling last year, but then last year's bill actually took the oil-based cannabis vape products that caused E-Valley and that have that oil base in them, they took those off the prohibited list. And so we took where we were just talking about solid concentrates, and then last year's law, it went into law and it passed liquid concentrates and oil-based products. And so previously those were prohibited. And so now we're talking about the potency on all of those things. And so now we are talking about additives and diluents, which we do not support. And we believe that the oil-based products are the ones that sent people to the hospital, and that they should go back on the prohibited list. And so I know there's probably not a lot of appetite to go backwards on that, but that is why they were on the prohibited list, is because that is what sent people to the hospital. Hold on. There's also, when you look at any sort of vaping of any sort of oil base, the evidence that's coming out on the unhealthiness of that is not just related to the high potency, it's not just related to the vitamin E acetate, it's related to any of those thinning agents which can have the effect of formaldehyde and acetaldehyde, however you say it, when heated. So we're putting Vermonters at risk of all kinds of chemical exposure just by having these products online.
So you said there's 2 states that currently or initially didn't have any kind of limit, Colorado and Washington, that are sort of exploring a limit, and one of them is the amount you can buy in a day, but it is not a potency cap.
They passed that in Colorado.
Okay, so, but they didn't say you can't have 60% or higher, they said you can only buy a certain amount. And then the Washington is looking at a 65% tax on stuff above, but also not a cap.
And also a 30% cap
On flour.
on all products.
So if there's a 30% cap, how would they tax products above 60% if they can't sell them? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, it is confusing. So there's two bills in Washington.
Okay.
One bill, which I linked to both of them in my testimony, if you have a chance to look at. One is saying, because of all of the adverse mental health impacts, we should put a 30% potency cap on all cannabis products.
Okay.
The other bill is that any products over 35% would have a 65% tax on them. So just like here where there's competing things, it's just another bill. Neither of those have passed
Okay,
yet.
so both of those are just introduced.
Yes. So, and there's a good political article that talks about all of the different states dealing with this potency issue that I also linked to. I want to just talk a little bit about the illicit market argument. We know that our neighbor to the north in Quebec actually has a 30% THC potency cap on cannabis concentrates, edibles, and THC vape products. And there's a 2021 study that is in my testimony as well that looks at 2018 to 2020 data that shows lower use of all of these products, and specifically by youth. And so that would be in the illicit market. So there's that. There's also just that in the states that have had the legal markets for the longest time, they have not seen their illegal market change. So and actually in Colorado, they said that they thought the regulated market would do away with the illegal dealers and drug cartels, and in fact, it appears to have just done the opposite. And in California, about 80 to 90% of their market remains underground. So, you know, I understand. I just think we have to weigh out the risk of these super high potency products and whether we need to go higher than 60% really doesn't, to the medical community, does not make sense at this time. So the other thing, I didn't go into this, but just I think we were talking about, when James was talking about the extraction methods of how you get to the solid concentrates, and we spent a lot of time looking at this, and actually when you want to get to that higher potency, that's when you use the butane and the hexane, but there's an American Academy of Pediatrics study from September 2018 that shows that carbon extraction is actually a clean way to get to those concentrates, and that they typically will yield a lower potency naturally. And that these non-solvent based concentrates are a cleaner way to do it. So one thing that we would say is that you should ban the solvent based extraction methods, and because those are unhealthy as well. We know that we are speaking against an industry, and this is a billion-dollar industry, and similar to big tobacco, they're huge, and it's very difficult for lawmakers to vote against them. It's very difficult for people to not want that revenue, and there's, you know, in James' report, the CCB's report, they say that the demand for these solid concentrate products is not very high, but what we've seen in other states is that the purchase of the concentrates begin to rise, and for example, Washington started their legal market in 2014, and by October 2019, they went from 9% of concentrates to 35% of the cannabis market. And so we're just very concerned about the mental health impacts of this. There's a lot of studies in my report. I know it can be a lot to look through, but in 2020, the Frontiers of Psychiatry Literature Review looked at high potency concentrates in public health, and they had 3 things that they recommended to people making decisions on regulating these products. And they said 1 is early restriction of cannabis edibles and high potency products. 2 is clear and consistent labeling that communicates dose, serving size, and health risks. And 3 is implementation of robust data collection frameworks to monitor the acute health impacts. And that would help all of us. And so thank you so much for your time. Please. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'm just wondering if any of the studies that you have sent our way or are citing look at other countries that have had legal markets for a lot longer than the United States.
Yeah, there's in my testimony,
Jill, did you send it to me? Because I don't.
I haven't sent
Okay,
it
that's fine.
yet.
That's part of what I'll have.
Yeah, oh, I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, sorry, I'll send it.
No worries.
Here I go. There's the Lancet, and the Lancet review. The Lancet is a psychiatric journal, and the Lancet review looks at mostly other countries because just with cannabis being a Schedule 1 controlled substance, it's hard to have good data. So yeah, sorry about that. I'll send this right away to you. And thank you so much for your time. Again, we do not support removing the caps, and we do support putting oil-based products back on the prohibited list.
Thank you. So Jeff, I know you're up next. We're just gonna take a 5-minute break and then we'll have you, we got plenty of time. Does that work for you?
Excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Awesome, thanks. We'll just take 5 minutes and then come back. We got plenty of time. Does that sound good to you guys?